Edges of Innocence. Chapter 1. Clara Reed and Ethan Emerson. Clara Reed and Ethan Emerson were colleagues, both in their early 30s, and among the most beloved teachers at their school. Clara taught literature, a subject she was deeply passionate about, while Ethan taught history, his calm, reflective nature complementing her lively spirit. They shared a friendship built on mutual respect and understanding, each finding solace in the other's company amid the demands of school life. Clara was a strikingly beautiful woman with an easygoing confidence. Her chestnut hair framed a warm, expressive face, and her green eyes sparkled with intelligence and wit. Her students adored her because she could make even the densest literature feel relatable, often drawing on her own life experiences to help them connect with the material. Her grace and composure had been hard-earned, shaped by a challenging past that she didn't share with many. A few years back, Clara had gone through a painful divorce. Her marriage ended after years of emotional disconnect with her ex-husband, a corporate lawyer whose relentless ambition left little room for their relationship. The decision to part ways was mutual but difficult, especially with a young daughter, Lily, now 5 years old, in the center of Clara's world. Her home, a small, charming house in a quiet suburb, was her sanctuary. It had a cozy living room with wide windows letting in plenty of light, a reading nook by the window where she often unwound with a book, and a backyard with a modest lawn and a small swimming pool. Clara had built a nurturing, stable life for herself and Lily, creating a space that was as warm and inviting as she was. Her family was her strength, and though they lived modestly, they were close-knit and deeply supportive. Ethan was the other half of her quiet friendship. He was tall, with a gentle yet firm demeanor that made him both respected and approachable to his students. With his dark hair and thoughtful brown eyes, he looked every bit the part of a dedicated history teacher. Students came to him not only to learn about the past but also for advice. His deep knowledge of history often came paired with wisdom about the choices and struggles of life. Clara and Ethan's bond grew naturally over their years teaching together. They often found themselves lingering in the teacher's lounge after school, discussing everything from the latest novels to philosophical debates. Ethan admired Clara's resilience and kindness, and she, in turn, was drawn to his quiet intelligence and humility. One afternoon in the teacher's lounge, after the last bell has rung, Clara and Ethan were finishing up day's schedule. Clara, laughing softly, said, "Ethan, you have to admit, no one quite makes history come alive like you do. I heard one of your students say that your lesson on the French Revolution was epic." "That's high praise from a 15-year-old. Ethan replied with a smile, "I'm pretty sure they were just happy about the reenactment. But if they're learning, I'm doing my job. I could say the same about your classes, you know. I had one of your students in detention last week, and he spent the whole hour going on about The Great Gatsby. You've clearly got them hooked." Clara, smiling and with her gaze softening, said "Well, sometimes, I think it's all about making them feel seen. Literature has this way of connecting us, even to people we've never met, don't you think?" Ethan nodded thoughtfully and said, "Absolutely. It's why I got into teaching in the first place, to help students see themselves in the people and events of the past. It makes everything feel a little less overwhelming." They share a quiet smile, the ease between them evident. Ethan feels grateful to have someone like Clara, who understands his dedication to his work and his outlook on life. Clara said gently, "I know I say this often, but I really appreciate having you here. Teaching can feel lonely sometimes, but with you around, it's easier." Ethan smiled back, looking into her beauty, and replied, "Same here, Clara. We're a good team." Their companionship was something special, though unspoken. Clara found herself quietly fond of Ethan's company, appreciating his integrity and kindness. He was one of the few people who truly understood her, and his gentle support had helped her navigate the challenges of single motherhood. As for Ethan, He'd often catch himself lingering on her smile a little longer than he should, wondering if their friendship might eventually turn into something more. Their lives were simple, and their friendship was pure. But little did they know, the arrival of a new student in Clara's literature class was about to add a new dimension to their bond. Chapter 2, Layla's. The next school year brought in a fresh batch of students, among whom was a girl named Layla, a young woman of 18 with a life molded by achievement, beauty, and tradition. She was everything one would expect from a girl raised in a well-to-do, devout family, graceful, respectful, and seemingly untouched by the desires of the world. Layla was fair, with an ivory complexion that glowed softly, and her features were a harmonious blend of innocence and allure. Her large, dark eyes held a silent depth, accentuated by lashes so long and thick they cast shadows on her cheeks, lending her gaze a certain softness that was both demure and mysterious. Her lips were full, almost distractingly so, and she wore the hint of a shy smile, a mark of her modest upbringing. Physically, Layla was effortlessly striking, with a slender yet sensually curved frame. Her posture, always poised and refined, was the result of years spent under the watchful eyes of a family that believed in carrying oneself with dignity. Her body was toned and elegant, thanks to a disciplined routine she adhered to since her school days. Her movements carried a natural grace, though her confidence gave her an undeniable allure, a gentle but magnetic presence that did not go unnoticed by those around her. Layla came from a conservative family with traditional values. Her parents held high expectations for her academic success and her conduct, often reminding her of the importance of family honor and reputation. Although she respected her parents, she had always felt a pull towards finding her own path, a desire that often put her at odds with their beliefs. From her first day in Clara's literature class, Layla found herself drawn to her teacher's engaging way of discussing novels and poetry. Clara treated her students with respect, making them feel seen, and Layla admired her teacher's insight and openness. She quickly became a favorite student, often staying after class to discuss her favorite books or ask for Clara's opinion on different authors. But it wasn't just Clara who caught Layla's attention. She'd occasionally encounter Mr. Emerson in the hallways or during joint classes and was captivated by his thoughtfulness and depth. The two teachers became role models for Layla, figures she felt she could confide in and seek guidance from. One day, after school, Layla approaches Clara with a question about a novel. Layla tentatively asked, "Ms. Reed, do you have a minute? I wanted to ask about Pride and Prejudice. You talked about Elizabeth Bennet's independence and strength in class, and I felt so inspired. But do you think that kind of independence can really exist today?" Clara replied smiling, "Absolutely, Layla. Elizabeth shows us that independence isn't just about living on your own or making bold moves. It's about knowing who you are and staying true to yourself, even when it's hard." Layla looks thoughtful, her admiration for Clara clear in her eyes. Layla said, "I guess I needed to hear that. Sometimes, it feels like I'm expected to be someone else, to meet everyone's expectations instead of my own." Clara placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder and said, "Don't ever lose sight of yourself, Layla. You have a voice that deserves to be heard. And if you ever need advice, I'm here." Ethan would occasionally join these conversations, his quiet insights complementing Clara's encouragement. Layla found herself confiding in both of them, and soon her admiration turned into a deep respect, and, unknowingly to her at first, a growing infatuation with Ethan. With each passing week, the dynamics between the three began to shift. While Clara watched Layla grow with pride, she also noticed the quiet looks that passed between her and Ethan, sensing that something was changing in her young student. The realization of this unspoken connection set the stage for both new challenges and reflections for everyone involved. Chapter 3: Tides of Admiration and Affection. It had been several months since Layla had first walked into Clara's literature class. She was one of Clara's brightest students, always enthusiastic about discussing novels and eager to dive into every assignment. Clara had grown fond of Layla's curiosity and ambition, seeing in her a younger version of herself. Meanwhile, Ethan had also noticed the young woman's quiet admiration whenever their paths crossed in the school corridors. The admiration between Layla and Ethan was subtle at first. She listened to his history lectures with rapt attention, her gaze lingering just a moment too long as he shared stories of resilience, heroism, and the lessons of the past. Ethan, for his part, viewed Layla as a promising student. He often offered her words of encouragement when they happened to cross paths, unaware of the deeper impact his attention had on her. Frequently Layla stayed late after Clara's class, packing up slowly and interact with her teacher on subjects of curiosity. One day Layla hesitatingly asked Clara, "Ms. Reed, do you think people are destined to fall in love with certain people, no matter the circumstances?" Clara looks up, slightly taken aback by the question but answered with a warm, understanding smile. "Clara, love can be unpredictable, Layla. Sometimes it surprises us, even if it isn't always convenient. But true love, well, it makes you better. Stronger." Layla said, "I guess, sometimes I feel things I can't really explain. It's confusing." Clara, sensing something deeper behind Layla's words, chose her words carefully. And replied, "It's natural to feel that way, especially at your age. Just remember, Layla, that you have time to figure things out, to grow into yourself." Later in that evening, Clara and Ethan run into each other in the teacher's lounge. Ethan, grinning, sat down in his chair, putting his briefcase down, and looked at Clara and said, "I think I may have finally convinced my students that history isn't just dates and dead people. How about you? Is Layla still your favorite in literature?" Clara replied, smiling with a mix of pride and affection, "She's brilliant, Ethan. So thoughtful, so eager. It's refreshing. I just hope she's taking her time with life. I get the sense she's rushing into things too quickly, in a way." Ethan, leaning back thoughtfully, said, "She's young, Clara. Remember when we were her age? Everything felt like it had to happen all at once." Clara nodded, a small laugh escaping her. "Oh, believe me, I remember. But Layla has this intensity, sometimes I see her looking at you, like she's trying to figure something out." Ethan raised an eyebrow, momentarily taken aback, and said, "Me? I hadn't noticed." Clara replied, "You wouldn't. You're always so wrapped up in your lesson plans and discussions about historical figures. But she looks up to you, Ethan. Just be mindful, okay?" Ethan, nodding earnestly, said, "Of course, Clara. I'd never want to encourage anything inappropriate." There was a pause, and the room fills with the unspoken depth of their own friendship. Clara glances away, wondering for a fleeting moment what it might be like if their friendship turned into something more. One afternoon after school, Layla approaches Ethan with a small, carefully wrapped book in hand. It was a gift for Ethan. Nervously holding out the gift, Layla said, "Mr. Emerson, I found this at an old bookstore, and I thought of you. I hope it's okay. I thought you might enjoy it." Ethan accepts the book, smiling warmly, and said, "Thank you, Layla. That's thoughtful of you. I'll definitely give it a read. I appreciate it." Layla beams, her heart racing as Ethan opens the book and glances through it. For her, this small gesture feels monumental, a symbol of the admiration she's long harbored. That evening, Ethan finds himself thinking about the gift. He doesn't want to overanalyze it, but he can't ignore the growing affection he senses from Layla. He shared his thoughts with Clara the next day. Ethan said sighingly, "I don't want to lead her on, Clara. She's a wonderful student, but I worry she's seeing something in me that isn't there." Reassuring him, Clara said, "Just be honest with her, Ethan. Let her know how much you respect her, how proud you are of her. Sometimes that's all it takes to clarify boundaries. Ethan replied, "You're right. Thanks for always knowing what to say." Clara's gaze softens as she looks at him. She's always admired Ethan's integrity, the way he treats his students with respect and kindness. But seeing him now, she wonders if she's also found herself caring for him more than she'd realized. The next day, Layla visits Clara in her office after school, feeling disheartened by Ethan's gentle but cold response during their last conversation. Layla said, her voice wavering, "Ms. Reed, have you ever felt misunderstood? Like people can't see how much you care?" Clara, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words, reaches out to reassure her. "Layla, sometimes our feelings surprise us, and we don't always understand them right away. But part of growing up is learning when to let go, and that's okay. It doesn't make your feelings any less important." Layla nodded, absorbing Clara's words as a sense of calm began to replace her disappointment. The weeks that followed brought a quiet shift between Clara and Ethan. Layla continued to excel in her classes, her admiration for her teachers tempered by the lessons she'd learned. Chapter 4: A Connection That Deepens. Lila and Mr. Emerson find themselves meeting more frequently after class, under the pretense of discussing literature. These moments quickly become the highlight of Lila's days, as they both discover an unspoken chemistry that goes beyond shared interests. They often sit together at a local park, exchanging thoughts on poetry, dreams, and life. These conversations become the foundation of their growing bond, and Lila finds herself lost in every moment she spends with him. Ethan, too, is struck by how much Lila brings out the best in him. She challenges his ideas, makes him laugh, and gives him a fresh perspective on the world. He struggles with understanding his feelings. Is it admiration, fascination, or something more? He feels a pull he can't explain, and despite knowing he should set boundaries, he finds himself drawn into the connection they share. When Lila surprises him with a book he'd mentioned once in passing, he's deeply touched. As a gesture of his own appreciation, he gives her a notebook filled with his favorite quotes, something he's cherished over the years. Their bond soon evolves into something unmistakably romantic. They begin exchanging small, meaningful gifts, a pressed flower, a handwritten poem, and even shared glances that speak louder than words. It's a quiet, secretive love, growing in the shadows, bound by the unspoken understanding that the world wouldn't approve. Chapter 5: The First Intimate Encounter. One day, after spending hours together at the park, they find themselves caught in a moment that neither of them planned nor expected. The tension and closeness they've both felt build to a point of no return. As they share their first kiss, everything around them fades away. Ethan realizes that this connection is deeper than he'd admitted to himself, and Lila feels an overwhelming sense of completeness, like her world has finally aligned. Their bond reaches its most intimate point as they spend the evening together. For Lila, this is her first experience of true closeness and vulnerability. Ethan is moved by the realization that she has trusted him in this way, understanding the depth of her feelings for him. This moment shifts his perspective, bringing a wave of conflicting emotions, joy, connection, and the weight of responsibility. As dawn approaches, they both feel a mixture of contentment and hesitation. Lila is elated, yet nervous about what this new depth in their relationship means for her future and the challenges they may face. Ethan is torn between the love he feels and the knowledge of his role in her life. He cares deeply for her, yet the complexities of their relationship and his concern for her future weigh heavily on his mind. Chapter 6: Love and Reality. Layla felt her parents' disapproval like a weight pressing down on her chest, each conversation ending with tension and frustration. They didn't understand. No one did. In her eyes, Ethan was everything, her first love, her first real experience of affection and intimacy. Her heart raced when she thought about him, about the times they'd spent together, the secret moments they'd shared. She knew she was young, but she was also certain that she had found something real. Determined, she brushed aside her parents' objections, convinced that the depth of her feelings would ultimately overcome any obstacle. Her friends cautioned her, worried that she might be acting impulsively, but Layla's conviction only grew. She knew who she wanted to be with, and she was willing to fight for it. Her parents' warnings of societal judgments and harsh whispers only fueled her resolve. Layla made sure Eden love was not a fling but real. They kept on meeting, enjoying each other's company and intimacy. She was happy with what was going on in her life. Days passed into weeks and weeks into months. Her love for Ethan never diminished. Her parents' displeasure was cause of concern for her and decided to talk about this issue with Ethan. One day Layla met Ethan in the park. Her face tense but determination was clearly visible. Layla's voice was unwavering when she said, "Ethan, they don't understand. They think I'm too young to know what I want. But I know my heart, and I know it's you." Ethan listened to her words carefully, feeling the intensity behind each one. He could see the fire in her eyes, the stubbornness and hope that only came with youth. But he knew better. Life had taught him that love, while beautiful, didn't always follow a smooth path. Ethan took her hand and said gently, "Layla, I understand how you feel, and believe me, it means more to me than you know. But you're young. You have so much of your life ahead of you, and I don't want this to cloud your future." Layla said with her voice breaking slightly, "But why should age matter? I know what I feel is real, Ethan. You were the first man who made me feel truly understood and loved." Ethan replied, caressing her hands gently, "And that means the world to me, Layla. What we shared is pure, and I'll always hold it close. But I've lived long enough to see how harsh society can be, especially to young women. I don't want your life to be filled with whispers, judgment, and regrets." Layla's grip on his hands tightened, her eyes searching his face as she tried to process his words. She felt the love between them, and the thought of letting it go was heartbreaking. Layla said softly with full sorrow, "So you want me to just move on? Forget everything we've shared?" Ethan replied sighingly, choosing his words carefully, "No, Layla. I don't want you to forget. What we shared is a part of you, and it always will be. But I also want you to understand that sometimes, love is about letting go. About giving each other the space to grow and find who we are on our own." Layla's face softened as she realized the truth in his words. It wasn't that he didn't love her, it was that he wanted her to have the freedom to build her life without the weight of their relationship holding her back. Layla said, whispering, "I just don't want to lose you, Ethan." Ethan pulled her in his arms and said, "And you won't, Layla. You'll always have a place in my heart. But your life is just beginning, and I want you to live it fully. To experience all the things you dream about, to become the person you're meant to be." In the weeks that followed, Layla wrestled with her emotions. The social pressure and her parents' objections weighed heavily on her, yet Ethan's words began to take root in her heart. She didn't want to feel lost, dependent on a relationship that, while beautiful, might limit her path forward. As much as it hurt, she could see the truth of what Ethan was saying. She was at a crossroads, and her choice would define the woman she was becoming. After many emotional conversations and difficult reflections, Layla decides to prioritize her future, understanding the value of independence and personal growth. She thanks Mr. Emerson for his encouragement, realizing he has been a stepping stone toward her finding her true self. Layla and Ethan celebrated New Year night together. They welcomed the new year in each other's arms and made love. The following morning Layla, while having breakfast, took Ethan's hand and looked into his eyes and said softly, "Thank you, Ethan. For everything. I'll always love you for the way you saw me, for who I was. I'll keep that part of me with you, forever." Ethan had gently pulled his hand from her hand and put on her shoulder and said, "And I'll always be proud of you, Layla. Watching you grow, seeing the strength you have, it's something I'll cherish. Go, live your life, and know that you have my deepest respect and love, always." They shared one last, lingering embrace, and in that moment, both felt a bittersweet sense of peace. Their love would remain as a cherished memory, a chapter in their lives that had shaped them both. And as Layla walked away, she carried with her a quiet determination to live her life fully, with the strength Ethan had helped her find. In the end, Ethan had shown her what it meant to love deeply, and to be loved in return. But perhaps the greatest lesson he taught her was that true love sometimes meant letting go, allowing both people the space to become who they were meant to be. Chapter 7: A New Path for Mr. Emerson. After Lila's departure, Mr. Emerson felt a mix of relief and loss. Clara consoled him, helping him see that his care for Lila meant making the right decision, even if it was painful. Over time, Ethan begins to appreciate the quiet, steady presence Clara has had in his life. Her kindness, resilience, and love for her daughter bring him a sense of calm, and he realizes the potential for something real and grounded with her. Clara's daughter, Lily, has always admired Ethan and looks up to him as a role model. Her affection and trust bring out Ethan's caring side, and he finds joy in his interactions with her. Slowly, Ethan sees the life he could build with Clara and Lily, finding comfort in the stability and genuine connection they share. Epilogue. The evening sun cast a golden glow across the school lawn, bathing the grounds in a gentle warmth as students and teachers prepared for the end of another school year. Ethan Emerson and Clara Reed stood side by side near the steps of the school entrance, watching as Layla and her classmates mingled and laughed, sharing their final moments before graduation. It had been a journey, one that tested all of them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Layla had grown into herself, finding a clarity of purpose she hadn't known before. The feelings she'd harbored for Ethan had gradually softened, transforming from a naive infatuation into a respectful admiration. Through the support and honest conversations she'd shared with both him and Clara, Layla had come to understand the difference between admiration and love. She'd poured herself into her studies, fueled by a newfound sense of independence and direction, and her teachers couldn't have been prouder. Today, as she stood with her friends, Layla's gaze met Clara's, and the two shared a warm smile, a silent acknowledgement of all they'd been through and how far they'd come. As the students began to disperse, Clara and Ethan found themselves alone on the steps, enveloped by a comfortable silence. The memories of the past months floated between them, conversations in the teacher's lounge, quiet moments of support, and the unspoken understanding that had grown stronger with each passing day. Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "I never imagined we'd all come out of this, stronger, somehow. Layla, you, me." He turned to look at Clara, his expression soft. "Thank you for being there, Clara. For everything. I don't think I could have handled any of this without you." Clara looked up at him, a warmth blooming in her chest. "I didn't realize it at the time, but I think we both needed this. To grow, to understand ourselves better. To find what really matters." There was a pause as she considered her words, gathering the courage to say what had been in her heart for so long. "Clara, Ethan, I've always admired how dedicated you are to your students, how deeply you care about their well-being. But somewhere along the way, I realized it was more than that. It was you." Her voice faltered slightly, but her gaze remained steady. Ethan reached out, his hand covering hers. "I think I've felt it too, Clara. Maybe I always have. I just didn't know how to make sense of it until now." He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, a quiet promise for the future. "I don't think I ever told you, but the reason I stayed late so many nights was just for a few minutes of talking to you." They both smiled, an unspoken bond finally spoken into existence. It wasn't a grand declaration, but it was enough. It was honest, and it was them. As the last of the students left, a small figure ran up the steps toward them. "Lily, Clara's daughter, her face lighting up as she saw Ethan. She'd grown attached to him over the months, sensing the special bond he shared with her mother. Lily grinningly said, "Mr. Emerson, are you coming to the park with us today?" Ethan laughed, exchanging a look with Clara. "I wouldn't miss it for the world, Lily." The three of them walked together, hand in hand, toward the setting sun. And for the first time, Clara felt that her life was complete. She'd found a partner who accepted her completely, who loved her not just for who she was, but for all she'd overcome. And with him, she'd created a family filled with love, support, and the hope for all the new beginnings still to come.